Okay, welcome back. We're talking about chapter 12, which is neuroscience in the brain. And one of the many reasons I love this textbook, which you're very tired of hearing me say, I'm sure, is the fact that it has this chapter. I feel like neuroscience is the future of our field. If we don't understand this, then we can't really help our clients because we are now able to look at the brain and see mental illness and understand all the different reasons or factors that are impacting mental health, such as diet and exercise, sleep, the gut-brain connection. We know there are more neurotransmitter receptors in the gut now than the brain for serotonin. Now, all that to say, marginalized populations have a really difficult time with these higher order wellness activities when you can't get access to healthy food or you don't have time to even think about healthy food. When we think about those of us who are stressed and you're in graduate school, even myself, it's easier for me to throw a frozen pizza in the oven than make a healthy meal for my family because of my schedule. And I know about all of these things. So if it's hard for us to do, you can imagine that it's next to impossible for many people and not even attainable. But we do know that we can change depression and anxiety and all sorts of other mental health issues with diet and sleep and exercise and just wellness activities. We know that the brain changes and it prunes and it accommodates and it consolidates, and dead neurons are sloughed off and pruned. And so we have all this data that we didn't have when I was in school. So first and foremost, let's talk about neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. Neuroplasticity, this from 2012 in your text, defines it as the process by which the brain is remodeled in response to both internal metabolic conditions and external factors. These processes include changes to the neuron, changes in the connections of the synapse between the neurons, the pruning, and then the neurogenesis of the creation of actual new neurons. And then neurogenesis comes from the natural process of removing those discarded synapses, unnecessary neurons, and then growing new ones, and that is called neurogenesis. So we're born with more neurons than we need, and those are pruned off throughout our life. And every night when we sleep, I'm getting ahead of myself. I know I am. Okay, yeah, hang on. So, don't y'all love these slides? I'm so proud of myself. I mean, PowerPoint just came out with some new templates, and they are fun. Isn't it more fun to learn with these beautiful pictures? So I've already said this, but neuroplasticity means our brain is constantly pruning and growing and changing and sprouting and strengthening and weakening, and all these brain therapies we do, that's what we're doing. I am strengthening neuronal connections or severing neuronal connections in EMDR. I know this is true. I have the data to back it up, and it is amazing to me. We didn't always know this was possible. We used to think, oh, you have this disorder or you have this issue and you're stuck with it and your brain is static, and when you lose it, you lose it, and that's it. But now we know that's not true. This process of neuronal pruning, which I talk about a lot with EMDR as an example of how EMDR works. But we're removing anything that's not working, the degraded, unnecessary kind of waste that needs to be moved or degraded. And the way that happens is when we sleep, glial cells come from our spinal fluid and they kind of clean house. They destroy toxins, clear away debris from obsolete connections. Those connections are no longer working. And honestly, that's what we're doing in EMDR. I am cutting a connection and I want it pruned out of there, and I am strengthening a positive connection. I have made a new association, a new neuronal connection. I actually have a slide in a minute to actually show you some proof of this. And what's happening in a stroke and a brain injury and things in your text, and please make sure you read this entire chapter, that removes, that's happening to damaged neurons. So there's the axonal and dendritic material that is damaged. And in healing that, it is removed. So you may be wondering, why are you telling me this? Why do we need to know this? We're not in school for this. You are in school for this. And I think maybe in the next couple of years, we may have a whole course devoted to this. At some point, we may even prescribe meds. We are getting to a point where we understand that everything really is coming from stress. Most of our health problems are stress and trauma. You link most of it back to that, quite frankly. So that you have to know about this, and you also have to know that there's stuff you can do to help this process. Look at all these strategies to increase neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. I get a little excited about this because I'm thinking, wow, we can help people regenerate neurons in their brain and get rid of neurons that are not working. So look at all these different ways your text talks about strategies. So let's go through each one of them. And instead of me doing a slide for each one, we can just talk about them. We're going to spend a lot of time in class. I'm going to do a live neurofeedback demonstration when we get back together. We're going to talk about your wellness plan because all of that information is in this chapter, and really kind of get into all the ways that we can help our brains be stronger. And exercise. You're probably tired of hearing about this, right? Exercise. Yeah, I know that's good for you. But really, I exercise probably 3 times a week. And when I don't get to the gym, I am not as healthy. I can't think as clearly. I already have trouble with focusing. And it really, really helps me. And so I really work out for this reason. Because it really helps me stay healthy in my brain. And the way that it actually does that, it increases our cardiorespiratory fitness, but it also increases the gray matter in our brain, in the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. And it helps us be able to think more clearly, be able to have a better memory. And exercise is really, really helpful in staving off a lot of illness. Now, another one that's on this list is enriched environments. Wait, I think I was recording and didn't know it. Okay. One of the things I like about this text is when we talk about enriched environments in each one of these categories, there's actually studies that are more current, a lot of really current studies and information to back these up. And I love this one in enriched environments about the mice. There are multiple studies with mice. One in which I was thinking was mice. It's an old psychology study, and they put mice in a cage with overcrowding and not enough food, not enough water, nothing to play with, no stimulating environment. And they started like cannibalizing their children and murdering each other. And, mice are pretty smart and really social. So that's not their normal behavior. They usually, work together. So when the little mice had a cool house, and like Johan Hari talks about this too. There's when we did the Chasing the Screen video, but this is a different study that I'm talking about. And they had, this is not the cocaine water study, but they had little mouse wheels, plenty of food and water, plenty of, I don't know what you call that stuff that they make a nest out of, but they had all these different, spaces where they could break out with their families, and they just thrived and flourished. So if you take that study and then reference the study in this book talking specifically about the hippocampal matter in the mice, you see that when they had an enriched environment, they then looked at their brain and they had this fivefold increase in hippocampal neurons. And just for context, because many of you may not know much about the hippocampus and what that does, I just pulled up this article here so that you could reference it. Hippocampus is a complex brain structure embedded deep in the temporal lobe. It has a major role in learning and memory. Also is a major player in EMDR. Okay. It is plastic and vulnerable structure. It gets damaged by a variety of stimuli, and it is affected by neurological and psychiatric disorders. We know, and look at this with atrophy and your hippocampus is affected um, when you have Alzheimer's. You want to take a look at some of this here. I can put the link in or you can just Google it. So, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. But look at all of this information now. It is also part of the amygdala, which is the fear-based area of the brain, stores fear-based memories. Now, what's interesting about this is in EMDR, after, this is escaping me. I wanted to say 10 sessions, or is it 15? It's right around there. And then there's an 11% increase in the surface area of the hippocampus. I mean, it grows. Because why? Because of neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. That was not me. That was my cat. Jeez. Let me pause this. Okay, I think the cat's okay. So then we move on in enriched environments. Again, we could talk about this a lot because then you look at the adverse childhood experiences study with the longitudinal study over 18, 20 years, where we discovered that the correlation with the number of adverse childhood experiences and mental and physical and all sorts of other issues and later in life, the correlation there. And that's mentioned in this chapter at some point. So if you aren't in an enriched environment, your brain is going to be the opposite. It's not going to be healthy, and there's not going to be new connections. You're going to have a really small hippocampal area, as well as other issues I could get into, which is we inherit a propensity, we inherit trauma too. So I could get into this now, but we inherit, if we have PTSD in our history, there was a study from 9/11 offspring and, Holocaust. I need more coffee. Holocaust offspring. Now, those offspring, I'm talking not impacted by the event. Like let's say Holocaust. Let's say they're great grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. That's about right. That I'm cross reference with the 9/11 offspring, but they weren't directly affected by the trauma. They were born with abnormalities in their brains, like suppressed cortisol, which you would think, oh, that's probably good. But suppressed cortisol causes a lot of problems for you. You're born with a reduced window of stress tolerance. And so not only are we talking about an enriched environment here, we're talking about you could be born, if you're born into poverty, you're born with, you didn't get dealt a great deck in your brain because your brain's already having issues from your genetic material from them not being an enriched environment. And then you perhaps are born into an environment that is not helpful either. So learning also is next. We know that learning creates new synaptic connections, and that's proven in the brain. So that's growing and strengthening. But if you can't be healthy, you also can't learn. So these are several things that kind of go hand in hand. Now, Attention in your book is talking more about the brain effects from us attending and reflecting and listening to our clients and being aligned with them. I went to a meditation and EMDR training. I think I've mentioned it. And we were in resonance, is what she calls it, this energy connection with the client. And I don't always use it. If I'm stressed and not where I need to be, I often don't even think about using it. It's funny how that works, but when I do use it, it's just a really beautiful connection with the client when we meditate together before doing the trauma work. So this great study where we look at the brain with MRI shows active listening lights up and activates the brain. When we're attending to our clients, it actually activates the ventral striatum. That's part of the brain's reward system. When we summarize, like motivational interviewing, you think about OARs. When we summarize, that's associated with the the default mode network, which is needed for reflection of self and others. And I will tell you what's really interesting for my work and being able to see the brain when we do a neurofeedback QEEG. A lot of times we see issues with complex trauma in the default mode network. And what that is a sense of self, who you are. And it's really corroborating when I get that data. It's really interesting, when you already know some stuff. I could probably talk about all of this for hours, so I'm not going to do that to you guys. It is fall break now, and hopefully you will still listen to this before we meet. Mental practice, that is also helpful for the brain. We know that visualizing the golf swing or making the shot will actually cause changes in your brain and give you more of an ability to make that happen. It is also CBT. If we can mentally say affirmations, positive statements, refute those distorted cognitions, then it's going to strengthen a neuronal connection. The problem and the caveat for me with this one is often people cannot do that because they're so out of their window of tolerance that their brain is not healthy enough to do that. You actually can't access that part of the brain to do that. And so I love it and it works, but it's also difficult for some clients. In my experience of almost 20 years, I have found that to be problematic sometimes, which is why I love the EMDR. I'm just biased, sorry. We know that massive physical practice can reinstate motor movement. And this is physical therapy, right? You have a stroke or speech therapy. This is what that is. Where you go 3-5 times a week and they give you exercises to do when you're not with the physical therapist or the speech therapist. And then over and over and over and over and over and over working it can regenerate it. So also very important. Medication. We talked all last chapter about medication. Your text talks about the atrophied brain when you have PTSD, a major depressive disorder. And your text talks about that's due to the effect of stress hormones or glucocorticoids. They're elevated when you're stressed and depressed. Antidepressant medication can activate those receptors, help reduce the effects of stress, and then increase hippocampal neurogenesis. It can reverse the deficits. I refer a lot for meds, and I talked about that in the last chapter, but we have medication for a reason, and especially right now, and I don't know where we would be. I really don't. Almost my entire caseload's on something at this point because of the stress we've all been under. And while we all want to pretend that everything is just rosy, it's not. So I think that is also stressful. So everyone's still in stress, but either people are just exhausted and, not knowing what the future holds. There's so many different things going on. And so medication is a great tool. So don't shy away from that. Transcranial stimulation, I don't know much about. And I want to start doing it because I'm hearing such great things about it. So I'm so excited that we get to talk about it now. I'm trying to find someone who could come show us how it works. It's really akin to like electric shock therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, which is still used to some degree, but now this is a much safer way to do it. It's a much lower electrical stimulation. And we're going to talk about neurofeedback in a second because neurofeedback is operant conditioning. It actually does not have a voltage going into the brain. It's actually just measuring and rewarding the brain. It is not putting electrical impulses into the brain. And to my knowledge, without me looking, it makes sense to me. Like I often wish, boom, I could just go in there and tweak. That hurts. Like the brain has an overoperating 10 hertz. It's electrical impulses. If you think about, I had this to the right, like that's what it looks like. It's, electrical impulses. I just moved my hand and that was a whole electrical impulse saying move the hand. And so, all of our overall brain is supposed to operate. All the wavelengths in our brain are supposed to be in a certain hertz level. And that's an amplitude and a frequency of an electrical voltage. And so like delta waves are low, say 6 to 8 hertz. And then there's alpha and there's delta. I just said delta. There's theta, beta, and high beta that we use in neurofeedback. And in all the regions of the brain, those hertz are supposed to be the same, and they're supposed to be congruent on left and right hemispheres. You want your left and right hemisphere to be on the same hertz. Well, they're not. I mean, I've looked at 200 QEEGs at this point, and they're not. Oh, I'm stretched. Sorry. I should probably edit that out, but maybe it'll wake y'all up too. Anyway, so they're way off. So yesterday I was brain training someone and their alpha waves were 42. Okay, they're supposed to be way like 10 to 12 hertz, I think. So what if I could go in there and tweak it? Or what if they're so low, like they're low power map, they have no amplitude, they are just down in the bottom. What if I could go in and tweak that with this transcranial stimulation and then keep doing neurofeedback? That would be so cool. So there is amazing research on this. We actually referred someone for ECT, and they may have done CES, but I don't know anyone around here that does it. But we had a severe postpartum case, and it ended up in North Carolina. They went and did it, and it was amazing results. So this is something you guys can do. And I think that as clinicians, you look at all this and go, wait a minute, that's not what I can't do that. Well, this is where we're headed. And so you get to do talk therapy too, because they need that too. They need to have that too. But then you can work on their brains and get their brains healthier, because if their brain's not healthier, it's a lot quicker to do this than trying to do CBT and brief solution focused over a period of time and then hope that they're compliant. So I'm going to see if I can find somebody to come show us this, but it's a weak electrical current, less than 4 milliamps, and it reduces cortical activation, produces a state of relaxation, reduced fatigue, decreased ruminative thoughts, also increases blood plasma levels of endorphins, serotonin, melatonin, norepinephrine, treats anxiety, depression, insomnia. Look at this thing with the tongue. That's weird. What is that? The portable neuromodulation stimulator. Never heard of that. Look, we're learning together, guys. Learning together. I have already described neurofeedback probably much better than your text did. So it is effective in treating everything. I can't say that because I can get in trouble with the medical society. So I have to say train. I can't say treat because that could be in trouble. And I think we're not popular sometimes because it's so effective that it could be used in lieu of lots of doctors. We're going to do a live one in class so you can actually see it and understand it, because for years I was so interested in it, but I was lost because people would go neurofeedback and I'd read a little bit about it in a chapter, or I'd go to a workshop for an hour and I thought, what in the world? How does this work? How are you watching something and the spaceship is flying with your brain? I couldn't wrap my head around it. And it's hard to understand, but it's really not. I think a lot of people overcomplicate things. So you're just measuring the brain waves. You're measuring the brain waves and you're getting an overall measure of the brain, QEEG. Then you come up with your treatment plan. Parts of the brain may be working perfectly normally. We don't need to target that. They may not be sleeping. Then we need to start back of the brain, 0102. We hook up electrodes. We do eyes closed treatment first, then eyes open. Eyes closed, we put relaxation music on. They relax. the more that their brain waves are working in the right hertz, it's calibrated in the software for it to be like, oh, wait a minute, we want your hertz to be 10 hertz. That's there. So every time the back of the brain with the electrodes measuring that hits 10 hertz, you hear the music more clearly and you get a reward tone. I mean, basically, we're ringing the bell, right? And that's classical conditioning, I know, but it's similar, right? And we're operantly conditioning with a reward. Your brain's like, oh, I can hear this better now. And over the course of 6 to 7, 8, 10 times in that one region, you get into activation on a regularly, and your brain starts to know it's supposed to work that way. And then you move to the next area. So it's really cool. Meditation and talk therapy, two of my favorite things. As you all know, meditation is highly effective. Many of you already know this, but there's plenty of research articles in this entire chapter that back that up. That actually changes your brain. And I paused our recording and started back editing right here. So I know I was talking about meditation and the changes in the brain that can occur from meditation, and talking about my own training in meditation and EMDR and being in resonance. And you can see from your text, there's many studies talking about the changes in the brain from meditation. This gamma synchrony that is said to reflect consciousness and insight is something we can see in neurofeedback. The synchrony is both hemispheres in being synchronous and in sync together with their hertz of gamma hertz. You see how difficult it can be with the brain research with someone who's just beginning to do meditation. You often, when we do this in class, we're meditating sometimes when I do those activities with you, and some of you may not be able to do it. You get frustrated, and that's because you're trying to pay attention and you're worried you're doing it wrong, and you're in your head, and so those different parts of your brain are accessed. And then over time, as you start to get more comfortable with it, and you just let it go and just notice what's coming into your mind and not judging it, the more you're able to get into that meditative state. If any of you have ever gotten into that state, it can be a really powerful experience where you're, getting insight and you're seeing colors or having some kind of experience that's really helpful. And I find that anyone can do this. And as clinicians, teaching people to do this or making a part of your session or ending your session this way is a really nice thing to do, because then they're doing it every week, once a week. So probably not going to do homework, to be honest. Only your people-pleasing clients will do your homework, and then you want to know more about that, right? Because they're doing it just to get your approval or whatever. So there's apps, and we talk about all of this when we talked about self-care, but at least once a week, you could do 5 minutes of some type of meditation. There's a million online. There's the Egg of Light and the ones I'm teaching you in class. So the Stream of Light, comfortable, relaxing place, just breathing. And then there's talk therapy. And all of these, remember, are increasing neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. And there was an older study that we reference a lot that looked at the brain and saw that 80% of clients got better when they used a combination of an antidepressant and talk therapy. So we know actually talking to a clinician does change the brain. Your texts reference neuroplastic strategies like mental imagery, which is meditation, hypnosis, neurolinguistics programming. I don't know much about that. EMDR and brain spotting similar to EMDR, paired with externally observed and internally experienced reflective responses is what your text says. So having a client access a memory and talk through it, or talk through what's going on, and then you offering alternatives like in CBT or brief solution focus therapy. And we'll learn more about that at the end of this semester in theories, and then again next semester, those theories. But you're offering alternative ways to explain or look at situations that perhaps they've not thought of. And the more that they meditate, aka think about this alternative strategy or explanation, the more that neuronal connection strengthens. And then the other one prunes off and they go, oh, okay, well, I should be proud of myself. I'm a vice president and I have children and I'm a single mom. And yeah, of course I'm stressed because I'm doing a remodel on my house right now. It's normal for me to be stressed. I am handling this well. An alternative explanation. So just talk therapy will change a brain. Okay. So what are the implications for us as mental health counselors? I really love this chapter. Again, I think it's a huge piece of what we were missing in the program. Didn't have a lot of time to talk about this in other classes. It didn't fit. And I love that this is something we're talking about. When I'm pausing, I'm drinking coffee. Sorry. So here are your implications. Neuroplasticity can work for and against a client. And in class, I'll ask you, what does that mean? How could it work for and against a client? You should know that by now from everything I've said. The brain is capable of change, but it's not easy. It's not easy. You've got to commit. I tell my clients when they come in for EMDR, we are going to have a love-hate relationship. There are times you're going to sit in my parking lot and not want to come in, but you know you need to. And what I mean by that is this very statement. It is hard to do therapy. It is not easy. You're asking your client to come in and be vulnerable and share information that perhaps they've never told another human being. And believe me, there's a good amount of that. I had someone, a professor at one point, tell me they didn't believe that. And I'm still mad about that because there are things people hold that they can't share with anyone. And they share it with you, or they know they're going to share it with you, and they're building, or they're going to have to go back and kind of relive it or re-experience it. Or they're holding on to it for 6 months because they're scared to tell you because they don't know how you'll react because of all of their prior experiences with the way people have reacted to them. And they haven't worked through that yet. And clients also don't trust you right away. And they'll say, oh, I trust you. I'm like, why? You don't know me. Like, why? I tell them right away, like, don't trust me yet. I need to earn that. I need to work to earn your trust. You need to make sure, you don't know me. I could be terrible. You've only seen me 2 times. Like, what if I, become a horrible clinician on session 4? So I'll say, easy. I need to earn that as a therapist. And so it is hard. They're coming in and having to be so vulnerable and maybe revisit emotions they have kept in a box for their entire life. And once we get through it, their life changes for the better. So it is this really interesting process because I have to really encourage them to come on in, and because we'll get them through it. Certain conditions make neuroplastic changes more likely, which we just talked about that, for the good or the bad. But we know that these things like drug use, traumatic brain injury, and let me tell you, I'm going to roll this morning on traumatic brain injuries are, I'm going to do a presentation on this. They are responsible for half or 75% of the mental health issues that we're seeing today, because we are just beginning to learn how small brain injuries that you don't even think you have are causing problems. So when we're doing neurofeedback, and I've just learned this in the past year and a half, we're seeing TBIs. I have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury. I didn't know I had a traumatic brain injury. I mean, if you had asked me that, I would say no. I never went to the hospital or never remember being on concussion protocol. And what we are seeing is the brain is basically malleable. It's kind of, it's not jello, but it's that squishy. I can't think of a good word for this. I don't know why I can't, but it's in there. There's space between the skull and the brain. And so if we hit anything, or a ball hits us in the head, or our kid pops us in the nose with the back of their skull, or we fall off a jungle gym or a bed when we're little, we have a TBI. And you might not have had enough to have a concussion, but you have it. We can see it in your brain. And 75% of the EEGs that we do, we see them. And we can work on that and heal it through neurofeedback, because we can train your brain to kind of go in that area and address those excess delta waves that are in that area. But also, any kind of stress causes your brain to change. We've been all of that's what's wrong with everybody right now, if you're wondering. And I've talked about that a lot, but we've all been real stressed. Everybody, the whole world has been super stressed. We were stressed before 2020, so we weren't doing super great, but we are for sure stressed after COVID and with COVID, after COVID, whatever, in COVID, the world, the war, the climate, we were just inundated. Hurricanes, weather, threat of nuclear war. I mean, people don't talk about it, but it is impacting our nervous systems and being under constant threat. And so that's why you're seeing this influx of substance abuse and suicidality and mental health. That's why. Learning is an associative process. Learning helps the brain. So when we learn new behaviors and new coping mechanisms, it strengthens. And this is why I am a stickler for you better not call me after hours, because I want you to use your coping mechanisms. My biggest thorn in my side are therapists that allow themselves to be contacted after hours. Because if your client, especially a complex trauma or borderline client, knows they can get you and get that need met by getting the attention from you at any point in any day, they're never going to use what you're teaching them. When they learn ways to cope, and one of the big things I do big cheers for is if they call the crisis hotline, because that's a tool. If my self-interest behavior clients, they end up, my cutting clients and stuff, if they call 988 or whatever, I don't make a big party for the cut. I don't make a big deal about it either. And I'll talk more about that throughout the next 2 years, how to explain what that process is like, because I don't want them to learn that, oh, if you cut yourself, I'm going to go, oh my gosh, are you okay? Where did you cut yourself? Oh, let me see. No. I don't give them any energy. I'm like, okay, you did that. That worked for you. How does that help? Okay. Is there something else you could do instead? Were you trying to kill yourself? What was, and they're like, no, I just, did it for the pain and it releases pain. I'm like, what are there other things we could do? That's how I handle that. Now, if they said, Dr. Veal, I was so upset and I cut and I called 988 and I talked it through with them and the crisis hotline, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. You called the crisis line. How was it? How did it feel when you called the crisis line? I want them to be empowered that they took ownership of their own health and wellness, and they made that call is huge. So if they do that, they may never make a call again, because that in and of itself is a learning process. Like, oh, okay, I took care of myself and I was important enough to take care of myself. And Dr. Veal thinks it's so good that I did this. And they're learning something about taking care and protecting themselves. So I could probably talk for 3 hours about that. Let's see. Early change is fragile and fleeting if it's not followed up with massive practice. Okay. When I do EMDR, we have got, this is why it works, okay? Because it's talking about it in it's in your book all over the place, because the research is just coming out in droves about the efficacy of it. But a negative experience is quickly learned and easily retriggered within a few seconds. But a positive state requires reflection, time, reverence, and time to soak in the enjoyable experience, like 10 to 20 seconds. It's a total, and that is because, think about it, when you're walking along and you see a snake, you better jump back, right? But that's not your prefrontal cortex that's doing that. It is your hippocampus, like amygdala. It's down there in the limbic going, whoop. It doesn't have time to think. There's no thought in that part of your brain. It's feeling. And it's like, whoop, fight or flight. I'm about to die. Jump back. Jump. So it's got to be quick. A negative association has to save your life. A positive association is something that you like, but might not save your life, right? And so we like cotton candy, but it's not going to save your life. But if I don't jump back from a snake and it's poisonous and I'm in the middle of the woods, I could die. So this kind of makes sense if you think about it like that. So we have to work a little harder to reverse that negative association in the brain and consolidate positive information and keep it going. So in EMDR, we're process, all the way negative to positive. Then we install a positive belief. Then we check your body because we store all our feelings from our necks down. Y'all are probably tired of hearing me talk. All right, mental rehearsal. This is CBT. All right. So basically, we know, and what CBT portion of EMDR is what I just said. We take a negative cognition, which is a belief like I am not good enough, linked with a memory. We go into the memory network. We have a series of questions that we ask a client in order to activate that memory network, get them all upset, which is what I want. Let them feel it, mind, body, spirit. Let them experience that. And I have a lot to keep them protected during that too, so they don't get out of their windows of stress tolerance. Then we go. And then until they come out on the other side. And now through that, I'm doing therapy. I'm going, how old were you? Okay, you're 6. Do you know how little 6 is? When you think about yourself as 6, what does that look like? And then, do you know a 6-year-old? Like, would you think this is a 6-year-old's fault? Like, would you tell your cousin that it's their fault that this happened? So I do all sorts of CBT-like technique and different techniques. It could be brief solution focus, narrative. I use all sorts of things, sensory motor, that I do while the client is processing. And at some point, there's insight that's gained. And we have extinguished the trigger in the brain. And then we are rehearsing the positive. Wait a minute, I was only 6. They were an adult. They should have known better. Yes, absolutely. Go with that. And look, when I'm doing EMDR, I'm bringing both hemispheres on. So don't get confused. I mean, any bilateral stimulation of the brain is going to encode. So we're bringing on left, right. Okay, so if you know the brain, and we should probably have a whole class on this, but we're getting the prefrontal on because that's the thinking part. The thinking part needs to talk to the limbic and say, chill, that's over. You're not 6 anymore. You're an adult. You are a grown ass adult. You can stand up for yourself now. Do you know you can do that? I know I said a bad word, but that's okay. I cuss in counseling all the time, and hopefully you will too. Because you just can't talk about some things without a cuss word, honestly. My colleagues might not agree, but I do intense trauma work, so I can't be like, gosh, that was really terrible. I mean, I kind of have to have an expletive in there. And even I encourage my clients to kind of just get it out. They may not cuss in their daily life, but I just encourage them to we are pushing so much down into our brains and bodies. And there's like the society and everyone's told us what to do and we can't do, and especially women and marginalized populations. I'm like, get it out. Like, you want to say F it or whatever. Say it in here, because we can do that. And it helps your brain, right? Because it's empowering to be able to say that and not have some repercussions. Let your therapist be like, yes, get it out. Okay. Y'all may disagree with me, and that's fine. I don't care. Talk therapy is brain therapy. It does change your brain. And so even talking to your clients and having that rapport is going to change their brain. Just so you see, this EMDR neuroplasticity study. So I have these series of brain images here, and I have one on your slide, but you can see the left brain pre-EMDR and the right brain post-EMDR. And I'm actually, I've piloted a few, I've offered a few free neurofeedback sessions for people, because what I'm trying to find is my own pre-post study with QEEG. And what I want to do is a pre QEEG, and then a full EMDR treatment, and then a post EEG, QEEG, to look at the brain. And you see here, this is a functional MRI, so this is a much nicer image. Of course, I'm just looking at the electrical impulses in the brain. But if you see here, look at that left brain pre-EMDR. that's the areas that aren't functioning in the way they should be. And I will tell you what that means and what I think it means. There's areas of overactivity and underactivity in the brain. And then you see look at this right one. Look at that post brain. Isn't that cool? And then I have these two. They're on your slides, but they're two different angles. And you see that unhealthy activity in the brain. And again, they don't say in here what that is, but knowing what I know from all the neurofeedback training, which is like basically getting a medical degree, I feel like, that is the areas of overactivity and underactivity in the brain, depending on the person. And that's both not working an optimum level. And then look here, we just have a few spots after. I mean, look at that. Isn't that amazing? I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And there's lots of data here. I'm not trying to make y'all many EMDR therapists. I know that's terrible. I try to be so unbiased, but that's my trauma. That's my Body Keeps the Score PowerPoint. I need to find our other PowerPoint. There it is. This one. Okay. Ooh, there. So I put one on your side just because it was neat. I am still recording. Yes, I am. Okay. All right. So we did that. Yes. Okay. And then the neuroscience of wellness. And I did the poverty simulation last week or this week because this is, my schedule has been crazy, which is why I have not posted these yet. And I'm so sorry. I have a brand new text and new PowerPoints I'm creating from scratch and new lectures I'm creating from scratch. And it would have been easier to just come teach class than do all of this. But I could have done that much more quickly. But it is what it is. But I was talking with our student, Holly. Hey, Holly. And, these things, and I've mentioned this earlier, these things are tough for marginalized populations and specifically people who are in poverty. I mean, these are kind of higher order things that we do when we have our shelter taken care of. If you think about hierarchy needs, our food, our water, our lights, our refrigerator, our car, like when you have all of that stuff taken care of, yeah, we can focus on these things. But man, I think it's difficult to do this. So we know that I want you to read this and understand the importance of these, though. I mean, sleep. Cannot tell you how many clients, once we've figured out their sleep, they're better. Sleep is paramount. I mean, it's just the most important thing for you with your mental health. We even know that there is a process with sleep that we talked about earlier where those glial cells go through the spinal fluid and flush out those toxins, including those beta amyloid proteins that are responsible for Alzheimer's. So we also know, and my theory is during brain training, during REM is EMDR while asleep. So EMDR is REM. That's what we're doing, rapid eye movement. While awake, attending to memories. If we look at dream sleep, what's happening and what the theory is the consolidation and pruning of material of the day, right? And that's why our dreams are so out there. But that could include higher state consciousness stuff. I mean, so it's not like dreams should not be addressed. Look at nightmares. You're reliving a trauma over and over and over. Your brain is looping. And it's in the excitatory firing pattern and it's encoded in the memory network and it's not consolidating. It is not going in a category. It is like danger, danger. We are going to die. And I could talk about that probably ad nauseum, but, so we got to address that stuff, right? I mean, we can't, if someone's having nightmares, then we have to deal with the nightmare and we have to find ways to get them to sleep because if we don't, then they're going to be depressed, anxious, and could be diagnosed with a whole host of other things. So your text even talks about melatonin. I refer people to take that all the time. 10-minute naps and neurofeedback training for insomnia is even in your text. We treat so many people for it effectively. We treat O102, SMRCZ. That's like the sites in the brain. And it's pretty amazing. So melatonin for kids, melatonin for adults. Now, you don't want to overuse melatonin because it is a hormone and it can affect puberty and things like that. So But if you sleep, getting sleep is more important. So if you can, that's not habit forming. It's natural to some degree. I mean, so if you have a client, you can refer them for that or have them check with their doctor if they're a pediatrician, right? So you always want to say that to cover yourself. That sounds terrible, I know, but you do need to do that. The diet, I mean, we know the gut-brain connection. We've talked about this. Our gut is a second brain. We found this out about 10 years ago, and it makes the most sense. We know that our food is contaminated, modified genetically. A lot of us are not getting anything fresh. When we do even get fresh or organic, it may not be. We know the contaminants in many of meats and in fish. So, definitely affects us. We know that there are supplements that help us to be healthier. And I often refer clients to take supplements too. So you may be confused about, wow, I didn't know we did all this, but we do. Fish oil, turmeric, vitamin D, and zinc, especially with COVID. I would talk to them about that, making sure they're taking supplements and doing healthy things. Exercise is so hard to get people to do, but we know that it changes the brain, and we know that it's going to reduce depression. So even walking, or sometimes clients I know is just not even, it's just so difficult for them. I will just say, I just want you to walk outside and walk around your yard or apartment complex for 5 minutes, or I just want you to get outside in nature and get the sun on your face for 10 minutes for vitamin D. So emotional balance, that's what we go for in EMDR. You're out of that, and you can see what's happening in the brain when you're under a constant state of threat. Your fight or flight engages, and then your hormones are released, and they continue to release, and your body thinks you're still under a threat, even when you're not. And what happens in social threats is, it used to be like a tiger's chasing us, and so we're going to run away, and we're going to hide in a cave, and the tiger's going to go away, and we're going to return to homeostasis. Now there's tigers everywhere. Tigers are everywhere. Everything's a tiger, because the way your brain encoded that information is a threat. And it's the snake that we talked about earlier, but it's really not a snake, it's a stick, but you still think it's a snake on the ground, and everything's a snake, which means there was somebody mean to you in 2nd grade. You encoded that to mean you're a terrible person. Then your teacher in 4th grade looked at you wrong, and that also means you're a bad person. And then at the end, you didn't know your part in the school play, so you're a terrible, awful, horrible human. You're the worst. You're the worst in the world. And then your mom yells at you and says something to you, and you're a terrible, horrible human. And it continues. And then everyone that reminds you of each one of those events or anything or any time of day, because your brain has a thalamus, which is a timekeeper that's exact and crazy, scary how exact it is. And I'll tell stories about that in a minute. But it remembers because it's supposed to keep you safe, and it has to jump back and protect you from that snake. So, it's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday on October the whatever day it is today. Or it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and that was a terrible day. And your thalamus remembers that because its job is to protect you. Now, it's not talking to the left brain to say, hello, that was 5 years ago. You're fine. Nobody's going to come rob you today. And your conscious brain won't even remember that day is occurring. You won't have a clue why you're so upset and stressed and panicked for the day. But your limbic's trying to protect you. So now it's really complicated, and it's complex because your right brain's trying to protect you, and your left brain doesn't know that's doing that. So your left brain has to be able to talk to your right brain, get your right brain to be like, hey, it's cool. That's not happening anymore. You're fine. So I just explained that, I think. So the goal is to get left brain to talk to right brain in whatever way you do that. And that also happens in CBT if you think about it, and not just EMDR, because what are we doing in CBT? We're using logic. So all of the theories, if you think about it, start to activate the whole brain and start to make sense of it. And then over time, your window of stress tolerance is going to increase, which means you can handle more, and your triggers are not going to trigger you anymore. So when you wake up on today at 10 o'clock in the morning, your brain's not going to go, hello, fight or flight, you're in trouble, because we've healed it. And that neuronal connection has either ceased to exist or has strengthened in a positive connection. We also know social connection and meaning and purpose in life. What theorist is that? And we know that as existentialism, and I did not spell purpose right. Look, I have a typo. But I would say to you, in social connection, remember from, Johann Hari, Chasing the Scream, we were made for connection. We were made to be in connection. Our brain has mirror neurons and other types of neuronal connections that respond to social interaction and connection. We know that your death rate increases and your health issues increase if you're lonely. So also in this chapter, it talks about biofeedback. This is something I would encourage everyone to learn and get. And this is a heart rate variability and skin temperature in ways that clients in your Apple Watches, while I don't like an Apple Watch at all, but the good thing about an Apple Watch is that it will tell you when to breathe. So that's a positive thing. I think I skipped RAM. That was emotional balance, social connection, and meaning and purpose in life. Well, we already know that. We need that, right? All right, I'm going to quit talking. This has been long, so I think I'm done talking. Am I done talking? Oh, yeah. So building your wellness plans, that's something that your assignment is coming up. And so use your text. There's page 327 in chapter 12 gives you tips here. And there's even a positive asset search that you can find. And I think that is in the index here. There's web resources. So check those out. There's TED Talks and articles. So I would encourage you to look at that and then think about your own wellness plan and start working on that. And also think about, how do we build wellness with marginalized populations? All right. I'm looking forward to seeing y'all in a week and a half. Signing out, as well as talk therapy.